Okay. Okay, so yeah, everything's fine. So good afternoon, everybody. And today I'm going to give the defense and with the title of Hierarchical Game Framework for the Distributive Resource Allocation in the Future Heterogeneous Network. And the general overview is showing as follows. And we will first give a brief introduction and talking about the development of the wireless communication network. And we'll also summarize it with the four-layer service architecture. Then I will just propose a hierarchical game framework, and starting from the zero determinant strategy with the application of the multi-tier wireless network, and then I go to the a multi-leader, multi-follower stackable game with the application of the LTE and license. And finally, I will give a general architecture with a three-layer hierarchical game with the application of the fog computing. And finally, at last, I will give the future works and the conclusions. So first and of all, and we already know that nowadays the wireless communication data is increasing dramatically, and we can see from this calculation figure that with the increasing of the data, and there is the increasing of the wireless devices as well as the a lot of amazing wireless applications that can help us to make our lives much more convenient and high efficiency. For example, in this video, we can see now when we ride our bike, there is a lot of data that can help us to adjust what is rising and what is if there is a danger behind us or around us, and also our health can be monitored, and everything can be monitored and help us to live with the means of the wireless communication. But such kind of various applications and increasing demands of the data requires high volume of the data transmission, and the high requirement of the data transmission requires us to make advanced version of the wireless network. So that kind of situation reminds me of the game of the plants and the zombies. And in this case, we see that we have plenty of the plants that are trying to kill the zombies, and when they just trying to go close to us and eat our brains. So in this case, we can see that the zombies can be the task of the data transmission, that we need to finish off them before he come close to us and eat our brains. And then the plants will be the wireless network. And in the game, there's kind of ways to kill the zombies much more faster and efficient. One way is that it can be advanced, which means that we can make the plant in a high advanced version that can shoot the bullet faster and higher frequency. And secondly, we may think that we can get many helpers. We may just plant multiple plants at the same time, so they can just help each other and do the and killing the zombies at the same time. So the zombies can be killed much more faster. And most finally, and in a general way, that we can see if we combine all kinds of the plants together, and each of them may play their roles during the cooperation, and then they can form to be a very powerful bullet to the zombies. So in this case, all the zombies can be killed much more faster, and the players for this game will be the god that can dominate all the tasks in the during the procedures. So in this case, we see from this example of the plants and the zombies, and we may see following these main points, the wireless communication network can also develop in the same way. So first of all, we can see if we want to make the wireless communication network more advanced, which means we can add more multi-layers in the network, like the small cells, like the picocells, and each of them can just serve their users around them and make and improve the spectrum efficiency and spectrum reuse. So, and secondly, is that we may get some helpers, like for the current wireless communication network, we can also combine it with a Wi-Fi network or some other communication networks to serve the users at the same time. So in that case, all the users can be served in a much more flexible way. And thirdly, and we can see if we can just combine all of them, and the network can be like user centered. In this case, all the users, all the resources like the base stations and the wireless spectrums can be flexible, relocated to the users based on the requirements in the network. And in this case, the network virtualization can play a very important role, and all the users can be satisfied their requirements in a much more efficient way. So but there comes an issue. So based on this development of the wireless network, we can see that there is a lot of autonomous or the selfish individuals brought in or introduced for the network architecture. So how to manage such kind of the autonomous individuals will be a main issue, and it will be the most important topic I want to address in the defense. So the following ways I was just talking about how can we just how to maintain or just control or just manage all the resources and the facilities or infrastructures so that all the resource allocations can be applied in a much more stable and high performance way. And based on the development of the wireless network, I will first summarize the service architecture that already that can be generally applied to all the networks nowadays. And we can see, first of all, we have the service layer, which includes all the wireless operators that can be have some virtualized wireless services for all the users and all the for all the users and all the data subscribers. And secondly, we also have the resource layer, which includes all the wireless spectrum resources, also the time, the transmit power, and the transmission time, such kind of resources that need to apply during the wireless communication. And thirdly, there is also a layer of the infrastructure layer, which includes all the e-node base or all the base stations that is already exist in the different kinds of areas that can help us to do the data transmission. And finally, we will be the users that will receive all the wireless communication services from the service operators, service operators. And based on such kind of four-layer service architecture, and we may see that nowadays the architecture is showing as follows. And nowadays, we can see the service provider own both all of the service layer, the resource layer, and the infrastructure layer. So each user is only need to connect to the service provider, and the service provider can just allocate or manage all the resources and infrastructures that it owns to serve the users with his optimal solutions. But we may see that nowadays there exists a lot of service providers at the same time, but there is a lot of situations like if one service provider is fully occupied with a lot of users, but at the same time, some service providers may have a lot of redundant resource or the infrastructures, and if we just put the structures in this way, the redundant resource or the infrastructures can be reallocated to the service providers that requires a lot of traffic at the same time. So that will cost a low resource efficiency, and that is a main issues that I want to address at this time. So in order to solve this problem, there's a way that maybe the resource layer and the infrastructure layer can be separated from the service layer, which is owned by the service provider. And in this case, when there are multiple service providers at the same time, all the resources and the infrastructures in different layers or different parts can be flexible allocated to different users or different service providers. But there comes the issue because we separated the service layer and the infrastructure layer, and they may just have their autonomous behaviors. And how to maintain or control the autonomous behaviors, it will becomes a problem. And here we summarize behaviors as mainly two classes or main two classifications. The first will be the layer behaviors in the horizontal for all the individuals in the horizontal layer, and we can see, for example, in the layer of the resource, and we can for different resource providers, they may just compete with each other to serve the users or to be purchased by the service providers, and they will be compete with each other. So they will form a static game that they need to make a decision at the same time to just make the highest profit for himself. And secondly, if we look at in a vertical way, and from the service layer to the user layer, as they make decisions in a sequential way, so there exists a sequential game and from the service layer, from the service provider to the users. And in this sequential game, due to the first mover advantage, the leaders or the player that have moved the first is already can predict what the reactions of the following players or the following individuals. So in this case, the service provider can just make wise decisions to achieve much better performance. And but even though for the users, as they can just still observe the behaviors of the service providers, the resource providers, the infrastructure providers, it can also achieve optimal solutions, and it is also the equilibrium solutions in this case. So for the following parts of this defense, I will just mainly combine the static game and the sequential games exist in this general service architecture. And all combined of them will be a hierarchical game framework that I want to mainly address. And the main contributions of this event is shown as follows. And we already talking about that. I will just model the distributive four-layer service architecture for that it can be a good fit for the future heterogeneous network. And based on that, I will propose the hierarchical game framework with first the zero-determinant strategy within the only the infrastructure layers, and also the multi-leader, multi-follower stackable game between the service layer and the user layer, and also the multi-layer hierarchical game in a general service architecture. And finally, I will just product some simulations that in practical scenarios that can be employed with the stable and high quality of the services. So let's talking. So I will just focusing like in the next session. I'm focusing on the hierarchical game framework, and the roadmap is shown as follows. And I will first talking about the multi-layer wireless network with a algorithm of the zero-determinant strategy. And I want to show that when the network is being advanced and there exists some small cell network, the whole network can be also maintained in a stable and high performance way. So in the small cell network, and we can see there will be a macro cell and the small cell, and they have their own infrastructures of the base stations, but they all share the same resource. They may share the same wireless resource, wireless spectrums. So in this case, we need to just manage the behaviors of the small cells and the macro cells so that they will just not have a severe interference with each other. And also on the other way, and we can see in this situation that when the macro cell users is located very close to the small cell base stations, and it will be better that it can be served by the small cell base stations rather than the macro cell base station. And in that case, because of the low distance and the low transmit power, the spectrum reuse can be improved, and the power efficiency also decreases, and power efficiency also increase. So in this case, there will may exist some cooperations between the macro cell base stations and the small cell base stations. So in showing this way, that in that case, the macro cells can be used in structures from the small cells. And but there, based on that kind of cooperation, there also exist some challenges. Due to the weak communication signals or maybe the cheating strategies, during the cooperations between the small cells and the macro cells, there may exist some cheatings from the small cells so that the whole performance of the networks will be dramatically decreases. In order to solve such kind of problems, and when trying to use a zero-determinant strategy that I want to show in the following slides. And first, to better model this kind of problems, and we're trying to show the example of the game of the chicken. And here we can see if there is only exist two players in these scenarios or situations, and both of them want to go across this bridge, but this bridge can only hold one person at the same time. So if two persons just stay at their positions, not moved, they may not be so happy or not be so sad. They'll be just in the middle level. But if one person just go across the street bravely, they play the action of the dare. The other just wait at the same time. So a person plays the action of the dare, which means they go across the bridge, will be very happy because they just finish their task very fast. But for the players that's waiting, that he sees his difference from the other players, and he will be his performance or his utilities will decrease dramatically. And similarly, on the other way, if the other person go across, and he will be very happy, but the other one will be very sad. And also for there is also a situation that both will just cross the bridge very bravely, and then they will just click with each other in the middle of the bridge and fall off the bridge at the same time, and they will just receive very bad performance for both of them. So based on such kind of dilemmas in these situations, and we're trying to model it as showing as follows. And here we can see if the players can be the administration of the operator that will be the macrocell base stations or macrocell operators in this situation, and the players of the another player which is the participant of the operation will be the small cell that exists in the network. And based on the interactions of the macrocells and the small cells, and each of them can play the action of the chicken or the dare. The chicken will be the transmitter in low transmitting power, and dare will be transmitted in the high transmitting power. So in this case, if one player plays transmitting in high transmitting power, the other plays transmit in the low transmitting power, the ones transmitting in high powers will just receive much more better performance. But if both transmit in high powers, that they will not, both of them will suffer a lot of interference with each other. And also, we define the utilities in this one static game that this game is only played once, that will show defined as the UA and UP will show as follows, and the value of the RSTP will follow in the relationship shown as follows, and basically it is illustrated the game that we already shown in the last page, and then if this kind of game is played iteratively, which means that it may play a lot of times, and we may consider the strategies of each player that is from current iteration to the next iteration. So we may define the strategies of both players as vector A and vector B. And here the vector A1 for A4 is shown as follows. And the A1 means that in the situation of the current iteration, both players play the strategy of the low transmitting power, and in the next iteration, the player X or player AOC, administrator of the cooperations, plays a transmission of the low transmitting power. The probability of such kind of situations is defined as the A1, and the definition of the A2 to A4 is shown in the similar ways and according to this graph. And similar for the strategy of the POC is defined the same way. And in the situation that both players play the transmitter in low powers in the current iteration, and the next iteration, the player Y, which means the player participant of the cooperation, plays the transmitter in low transmitting power. Such kind of probability of such kind of situations is defined as the B1, and is defined in the similar way. And based on such kind of definitions, and we can just easily model it as a Markov process, and which is shown. And the transition matrix from the current state to the next state will be the combination of the strategies of both players in this game. And also, this macro process can achieve the stationary state, and we define the stationary vector as the Vs, which means the Vs times the transition matrix of H will equal to the Vs itself. And based on this kind of during the stationary state of this macro process, and we can define the expected utilities of both players of the AOC and the POC as follows, which means which equal to the probability of these four situations times the corresponding performance or utilities that he can receive in this situation, and it will be the expected utilities and for both players, which is shown as the UA and the UP. And here, and on the other side, we may see that in the stationary state, the Vs times the transition matrix H is equal to the Vs itself. Then, if we define the H prime equal to the H minus 1 identity matrix, and then we can see the Vs times the H prime will equal to 0. And on the other side, according to the Cramer's rule, the aggregate of the H prime times H prime will equal to the determinant of H prime times the identity matrix. So if we define the matrix H prime equal to the H minus the identity matrix, and shown already. And according to the properties of the H prime, that the educate of H prime times H prime can equal to 0. And compare these results from of these two, and we can see that every row of the educate of the H prime can be proportional to the vector, Citrian vector of the Vs. So based on such kind of solutions, or the result, if we times Vs with any vector f, and we just use the proportional relationship of the determinant we shown in the last page, and we can get the determinant shown as follows. And here in this determinant, we can see the second column is only related with the strategies of the player AOC, and the third column is only related with the player strategy of the player POC. And if we set the second column and the fourth column in a proportional relationship, and this determinant can equal to 0. And based on such kind of solutions or result, and you will set the vector f equal to the linear combination of the utilities of the AOC and the POC in one iteration of the game. And according to the when Vs times the f itself, and if the strategy of the AOC is have the relationship of the proportional relationship, and then we can see the result will be this linear relationship of the expected utilities of the AOC and the POC. So based on this kind of result, we can see that only one of the players can determine their strategies that can unilaterally determine this kind of linear relationship of the expected utilities of the player himself and his component. And based on such kind of powerful solutions, if we want to maximize the social welfare, which is defined as the linear relationship of the both expected utilities of both players, and if we use the zero determinant strategy, which has the solution of the linear relationship in this case, and we can just transfer this optimization problem as a minimize of the gamma, which is this one, and following the strategy that the player AOC plays, the zero determinant strategy. And we can get the solutions of the zero determinant strategy, and based on this optimization problem, and we can also solve the gamma minimum of the gamma, and which can equal and easily transfer to the maximum social welfare that's already shown at the very beginning. So based on such kind of ways, and we can easily see that whatever of the players of the POC is, that the player of the AOC, as long as he can apply the strategies of this A following this relationship, that can unilaterally determine that the social welfare of this can be maintained in a maximum value. And that is powerful solutions I want to address. And based on such kind of zero determinant strategies proposals, and we product some simulations showing as follows. And we compare with our proposed zero determinant strategy with some very traditional or classic strategies that exist in iterative games. The first one will be the energy saving strategy, which will transmit low transfer powers at all the times during the game. Secondly, will be the aggressive strategy, which always transmit in high transmit powers. And the third one is tit for tat, which is for each player who always follows the behaviors of the other players in the last iteration. And the Pavlov strategy will set a threshold, and if the utility of one player is higher than threshold, this player will keep his strategies unchanged. But if lower than this threshold, he will just switch his strategy to some other behaviors. And we can see from the simulation that when the one user adopts the zero limit strategy, when the AOC adopts the zero limit strategy, whatever the POC or whatever the other player plays, the final utility can always convert to the same value, and this value can sometimes relatively high compared with some other strategies, which may also not very stable, and also compare with some the energy saving and aggressive strategies, the zero determinant strategy can just achieve a stable and relatively high performance. And also, we're also trying to increase the number of the POCs and also increase the number of the actions of the POCs. And basically, the zero limit strategy is playing the same way. And we show the performance as follows. And we can see with the number of the POCs increasing, generally the social welfare increases because there are more small cells that can serve the users. And but the increase of the speed of the increasing gradually decreases because of the limited areas in the scenarios. And secondly, we can see the zero limit strategy can also maintain in the fixed values and it's also relatively high compared with some classic strategies that exist in the iterative games. So that is the first part I want to show, which just exists in the infrastructure layers. And secondly, I want to just, for the wireless communication network, it may also search some other collaborations from other networks. And here, and we will just combine it with the Wi-Fi network and show the application of LTE unlicensed in this section. And here we can see that in the due to the limited amount of the resources in the unlicensed spectrum, the wireless communication network trying to use some unlicensed spectrum to just improve its performance. So, and also we can see that if the unlicensed spectrum is used or served in LTE technology, the performance can be just larger than the ways that we transmit in a Wi-Fi way. So in this case, we may see that if the resource layer in the Wi-Fi network can be just used or offloaded to the wireless operators, so that wireless operators can have more wireless spectrums to serve their users. And in this case, there may also exist some challenges. First will be that due to maybe there exist multiple wireless operators at the same time, and you want to use the unlicensed spectrum at the same time, there also exists the severe interference with each other. And due to according to the figure, we can see if they have the interference, the performance decreases dramatically. So in order to do that, in order to solve this kind of problem, we need to maintain not only the behaviors between the operators and the users, and also how to maintain or manage the competitions among all the operators. So in this problem, I formulated the game framework showing as follows. And first, we can see between the operators and all the users, there will exist a multi-leader, multi-follower stackable game. And among all the operators, due to the competitions, there will exist a non-cooperative game. And also between the users and the spectrums, especially the unlicensed spectrums, there exists a matching problem that for the subband allocation. So based on that, we first need to define what is the utilities of such kind of these two main players in this game, or two main individuals in the game. The first part will be the player, will be the user. That the utility of the user is defined as follows, and we can see it exists. The first part will be equal to the utility that can receive in the licensed spectrum, which is the capacity, and the second part, and this part will be the total capacity that can receive, and gamma will be the revenues that can for each data rate he can receive for this user. So this one, the first part will be the total revenues can receive for this user, and lambda will be the matching that if this user J is located with the subband S or not. If it's located with subband S, lambda will equal to 1, otherwise equal to 0. And also on the second part will be equal to the payment that is need to pay for other operators due to the interference and to each other. So in this case, this will be the interference penalty, and R will be defined as a price to charged by each operator I, and P will be the transmit power, HE will be the channel gain. And also, you can see R will be the spectrum efficiency in the unlicensed spectrum, and will be defined as follows. And we can see Z will define as interference in this subband S in the unlicensed spectrum. And also compare based on the payment from the users, and the utility of the operators is showing as follows, will be equal to the summation of all the payment from all the users at the same time during the data service. And here we can see that there exists a relationship of the between the operators and the users, and the operators can just set their price first, and based on the setting price, all the users is required to determine what is the optimal transmitting power is. So there will exist a first mover advantage, which means that the operators which act first is already is able to predict what is the reactions of the users, so that he can determine his price wisely to achieve a better performance. And for the users, he can only just optimize his own variable of the P of the transmitted power based on the given price of all the operators. So so based on this kind of relationship, and we need to solve a sequential problems, and which is shown in this first in the following way. And because of the first mover advantage in the stackable game, the backward induction is required. So we first need to determine what is the strategies of all the users based on the given price and based on the allocated subbands in the analysis spectrum. And based on after knowing that what is the optimal strategies, after knowing the relationship of the optimal transmitted powers with the subband, with the setting price of the operators, we then consider what is the optimal matching solutions of the subbands and the users. And finally, compare after knowing all the relationship of both two, and we can determine what is the optimal setting price for each operator so that he can achieve higher performance. So first, I will determine what is the strategy of the users. And we already know that the utility of the user can be seen as a convex function, so that we can just take the first derivative equal to 0 and achieve the optimal transmitter power. And we can see which it is related to the setting price of the users, and also it's related with the parameter of the S, which is a subband allocated to the user. And also, this transmitting power also have a threshold as a higher bound, which means that it is said that it cannot have a strong interference to other unlicensed users, such like the Wi-Fi users of others. And here, the Q will be defined as the channel gain over the noise. So based on the optimal solutions of all the transmitted powers, we then consider the second part will be the matching from the subband and the users. And such kind of matching will be produced in a Gale-Shapley algorithm. And here we just provide a very easy example with the stable marriage matching problem. And here we can see there will be two parts in this matching. First one will be all the boys, and may name the Adam or Bob or Carl or Hua Qing or anyone. And the second is that will be the girl that is waiting for the proposal of the boys, and will be named like the friend, the Gita, the Heki, or Irina. So in this whole procedure, all the boys trying to propose for his own preferred girls. And each of the boys have a preference list for all the girls. And similarly, for all the girls, you also have the same preference list for all the boys. So, for example, for the Adam, the preference list is Gita is the first one, the Heki is the second. So he will just propose the Gita as the first. And Gita see that there is nobody else, no boyfriend right now, so he will just accept Adam at the first time, at this time. And secondly, we see the Bob. Bob has the first one is the Arena, so he will go for the Arena, and Arena has no other boyfriend, so he will accept the Bob. And similarly for the Carl, he will first go to the Gita, but the Gita already has the Adam, so Gita will see that who I prefer for both Carl and Adam who I prefer, and Gita find that he prefers the Carl, so he will reject the proposal of the Adam, and Adam will look again on his preference list, and he sees the Heiki, so he go for the Heiki, and Heiki no boyfriend, so Heiki accepted Adam. And also for the David, he will go for the Arena at the very first, and due to Arena left David first, so Arena will reject the Bob, and Bob will look for his preference list and see the friend, and he go friend. And in this situation, we can see that each boy will find his optimal growth, how find this dreaming girls, and we can see that no boys can find other girls that is have no boyfriend. So and also find his family list. So that will. I'm still proposing. I have a long preference list. Okay. 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 So based on such kind of boys and girls proposals, and if we put in the relationship of the user and the subbands, it's working the similar way. So the users will be all the boys, and he need to propose to all the subbands, and you see that he can be allocated to himself or not. So in this case, we define the preference list of the man, or the preference list of the users will be the utilities that he can receive if the subband is allocated to himself. And the preference list of the subband will be the revenues for all the operators that can receive in the subband S, and which is defined as follows based on the optimal strategies of all the users. And also the algorithms of the matching is basically shown in the animation that there is that each man or each user will propose to all the subband, and according to his preference list, and subband will just accept or reject according to his preference list. And here also do a small evaluation, see that such kind of matching is very close or close to the global optimal solutions, and which is shown has a very small gap. And also, based on the predictions of the matching result and based on the optimal strategies of all the users, and then we consider what is the optimal strategy for the operators. And here, we first will determine, we consider the situation that if all the operators are non-cooperative with each other. And here, we first put the optimal strategies of the transmitting power of the users into the utility function of the operators. And here, it will be shown as follows. And we can see in this utility function of the operator I is related with the setting price of the Ri, is the setting price of himself, and also is related with setting price of other operators. So in this case, we propose a sub-gradient method to determine what is the optimal price for each operator. So in this algorithm, each user or each operator will just adjust the price with a small step in each iteration, and until that no operator is able to just change or increase or decrease its price with such kind of small step, that so that his utility can improve. And based on that kind of situations, that all operators can just achieve equilibrium solutions. But such kind of solutions may just only the local optimal solutions, which may have some gaps compared with the global optimal solution. So we consider that if we can consider what if there is some cooperative strategies for the operators. So which means that each operator will consider that we will try to maximize the total utilities of all the operators, summation of all the operators. So we submit all the utilities of operators and showing in this following ways. And here the k will equal to this equation. And here, based on that, we can see there is a relationship that for the total utility of the operators, and it is linearly related with the setting price of all the operators. So in this case, as the setting price has some constraint due to the in the analysis spectrum, the operators cannot severely interfere the users in the Wi-Fi network or in the other analysis network. So according to this constraint, the setting price is following this region, and also we consider that if the R, and in this figure we can see the X will be the setting price of the operator 1, and the y-axis will be the setting price of the operator 2. So if we set a linear function of the g equal to the k1 times r1 plus k2 times r2, which will be related with the total utility of all the operators. And if the g achieves the minimum values, the total utility can achieve the maximum value. So we're just trying to move this line closer to these available regions until it has the first crossing. And such kind of crossing way of this line will achieve the minimum value of the g and also achieve the maximum value of the total utilities of all the operators. And such kind of and this way, and in this point, a crossing point of the O star will be the optimal solution in the global in the cooperative strategies for all the operators. And based on such kind of all the behaviors of the operators and the users, and we product the simulations as follows. And we can see with the number of the users increasing, the total utilities of all the operators generally increases because with the number of the user increasing, there will be more payment for the operators, and the operators can have a much more better revenues for himself. And also with interference from the Wi-Fi increases due to the strong interference and due to the guarantee of the performance of the Wi-Fi users, the total utilities of the operators generally decreases. And also we can see the cooperative schemes is always better than the non-cooperative schemes, but the gap is not very large, and also both of them is higher than the single operator schemes. So that is part of the correlations for different kind of networks. And finally, we will want to see that if we consider a very general network which has all the resources can be flexible allocated, and we just take an example, take an application of the fog computing in the network virtualization. And in this case, I will just want to be the god in the network resource allocation. And here we can see that at the very beginning, the cloud computing nowadays is very popular, but it still have some shortcomings, which may have a very long latency, and also we transmit a lot of data, the transmit cost is very high. And consider the application that's very popular in the previous month, the Pokemon Go. And if we want to use augmented realities in the data transmissions in the wireless communication network, if the delay is very high, then such kind of application cannot be achieved. It's also in the vehicular networks. If we just have a very long or slow response, there may exist some very disastrous traffic problems in the situations. So in order to solve that, the fog computing is introduced, which is implemented between the cloud layer and all the device or the user layer. And in the fog computing, the fog node will be located very close to the end users, so that he can just provide some small data computations or data computings to the users with a very low latency. But there also exists a problem that how can we just motivate all the fog nodes to help all the users and to provide the services. So in this case, we formulate the system architecture as follows, and we can see there may exist multiple data service operators, and there also exist multiple data service subscribers. And between the operator and the subscriber, and there exist a lot of fog nodes, and for between the data service operators and the fog nodes, the data operators need to motivate the fog nodes to help himself to serve the users and all the subscribers. And between the fog node and the data service subscribers, the fog node, there exists a physical data transmission link, and the actual data transmission exists between the fog node and the data service subscribers. And also between the data service operators and data service subscribers, there exists a virtual data purchasing market, so that the subscribers need to select his optimal service operator and do all the data purchasing or connections with the operator directly. So in this case, based on such kind of complex relationship among all the data service operators and data fog node and all the data service subscribers, and the way just model it in a similar mapping it with a similar wireless network virtualization. And due to the fog node is invisible for all the users, because all the users only accessible to the service providers of data service operators in a virtualized network. So for this part, for the fog nodes part, which includes all the resource layers and the infrastructure layers, is invisible for the users, and the user only has the relationship with the service provider or the data service operator. So in this case, firstly we need to define the utilities of all the players of the data service subscribers, data fog node, and the data service operators, and which is shown as follows. And the utility function of the data service subscriber is defined as follows, which is equal to the first workload rate minus the total payment that he need to purchase from the data service operator in a virtualized network, and minus the total delays as the penalty. and the delays will equal to the summation of the network delay plus the computation delay, and the computation delay will follow the Q theory, and the mu will be the service rate, and yeah, Q will be the the amount of the computing resource blocks, and we are generally showing this way. And according to based on the utility of the data service subscriber, the utility of the data service operator is shown in the following way, and is equal to the total revenues can receive from all the data service subscribers minus the all the motivation cost of the motivation of all the fork nodes, and minus uh, the the cost of the servers that he need to serve by himself. So the QIO will be the amount of the computing resource blocks served in the massive data center servers. And based on the motivations, the utility functions of the fork node is showing as follows, which is equal to the all total revenues that he can receive from the motivations of the data service operators minus the total cost that he need to provide, he need to suffer, or he need to offer to the data service subscribers. And for these three kind of players, they need to maximize his own utilities based on the constraint of the maybe the time threshold of the time, or the positive values of his utilities, and there's also some constraint of the computing resource block of the computing resource blocks, because for the fork nodes they may just have the maximum resources provided for himself, and based on the but for each of them they need to solve their problems individually based on the optimal strategies that is determined by others. So how can we solve such kind of complex problems will be a challenging question. Will be a challenging question. So in this case, are we trying to yeah?
Here, the load of the operator is seems to be fixed. Is that right? You assume the operator load and
yeah,
the
the requirement of each user is fixed. It's like the workload of the
load,
yeah.
I mean, would it be more meaningful to assume a distribution of load, for example, or latency and all the parameters? Like, because when we have the network service from operator, it normally varies according to time of the day, according to the condition, different weather condition, for example. So I think it's more meaningful if we have a distribution instead of has like assume a fixed number, for example.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So in this case, I may just assume that for each time I have a fixed value of the requirement, but yeah, maybe the time there have some yeah that may just exist, can be expanded from this kind of work, from this work. Yeah. So continue of the definition of the utilities and formulate the problems, and we can see we're trying to solve the distributive behaviors of both data service operators, the fork node, and data service subscribers. And here we have the hierarchical game framework shown as follows. And in this hierarchical game, we're first trying to solve the matching games between the data service operators and fork nodes. So the data service operators is trying to motivate different fork nodes so that he can serve his own purchasing users. And based on the matching result of the data service operators and the fork nodes, the motivated fork node will just trying to provide the physical computing resource blocks to the data service subscribers that is already purchasing the data service operators. And according to the matching of the result of both the data DSOs and the FNs and the FNs and the DSS, and we propose a stackable game between the data service operators and data service subscribers to determine the pricing problems in the virtualized data service market. And such kind of three games played in a sequential way. And similarly, we will just analyze in a backward induction way, and we'll just analyze backwards. And we first consider what is the optimal solutions in the optimal or equilibrium solutions of the stackable game. And based on the equilibrium result, we'll go back to the matching game, which is a stable matching of the between the fork nodes and the data service subscribers. And based on the stable matching result, and we'll go further to the matching between the data service operators and all the fork nodes. So first, we'll consider the relationship of the data service subscribers and the data service operators. And
it makes me wonder if we can, this optimization, can we like connect like a deep network and backpropagate to maximize utility?
But in the middle, you have so basically here you have all the deep learning you don't have.
Right, I'm saying like it's some novelty has to be introduced, but I'm saying, can you do that way?
I'm thinking about the deep learning. I guess the deep learning is good. Yeah. Let's go back further.
Yeah.
Whenever super dependent, I think we can talk later. Together.
Yeah. And I also show one potential works, and maybe we can discuss later. And also, as due to the convex of the utility function of the data service subscribers, we can just take the first derivative equal to 0 and get the optimal amount of the computing resources purchased by the data service subscribers. And also, based on the purchasing amount, the data service operators can determine the price. And we just put the optimal ones into the utility functions, and we can solve the optimal and get the optimal solutions of the service price in the virtualized network, and which is shown as follows. And based on the optimal amount of the purchasing resource blocks, and the optimal setting price, the data service operators trying to motivate the all kind of the fork nodes to serve their own purchasing data service subscribers. And the preference list of the DSOs is according to the revenue, total revenue can receive in his utilities. And similarly for the fork node, the preference list is also based on the utility functions of the fork, of the FN. And in the during the matching between the data service operators and fork nodes, all the fork nodes will first propose to different data service operators, and the data service operator will select the optimal ones, some optimal fork nodes, and reject the redundant ones, and the rejected ones will propose the second preferred data service operators until all of them can achieve a stable matching result. And based on this stable matching, and we can see there exists the relationship of between the DSOs and the FNs.
Sorry, can I jump in because I'm leaving in 5
Oh,
minutes, so I want
okay.
to ask 2 questions.
Okay.
Can you go to page 43? Back to, I think you mentioned there is a many-to-many matching here, but according to your description,
Sorry.
it looks like many-to-one matching, right? So all the whatever DSS proposed to somewhere, and the other side decide accept or not. It's not many-to-many matching.
Yeah, it's not that complex many-to-many matching.
Yeah, here you show many-to-many matching, right?
Yeah, but generally here I mentioned that is that there exist multiple FNs and multiple DSOs. They actually try to match each other.
According to classical many-to-many matching definition, there will not be classical solution for stability. So that's the reason why I'm really curious if you talk about many-to-many matching, what's the possible way? I mean, for some specific many-to-many matching, we have stability solution, but for general one, we don't have stability solution.
Yeah, that's also my concern that if we just trying to do it in a very complex like the many-to-many matching, maybe that situation exists. And in this case, I just trying to maybe, as you say, it's a many-to-many match. Yeah. It's not.
In practice, the real situation is many-to-many.
Yeah.
But there's no algorithm for many-to-many. So you have to do many-to-one, which is obviously suboptimal. But you need to explain kind of there's no solution that you can handle the many.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the slides you need to change, or you need more explanation.
Yes.
Another question is
and
about
also
the second scheme about the cooperative solution.
Yes.
Is all the operators know each other's information? I mean, the operators, they know the global information of the other operators?
Yeah, in the cooperative ones, yes.
But still, you remember when the recursive asked you a question? What's the difference between this one and optimization? If the operator know all the information.
I didn't get it.
I mean, compared to general optimization, if all the operator they know the global information, what's the difference? Why the operator doesn't do any kind of optimization through the three layer, but you do your way, cooperative communication, cooperative collaboration, cooperative game, then matching, then another game. Well, why you want to do this way? I mean, if it's not cooperative, I can understand because everybody plays themselves, right? They play selfish. All the ways distributed.
Yes.
But
yes.
if you play cooperative game, there's like the most upper layer is kind of centralized, similar to optimization. Why you don't do the optimization through all the way, all the three layers?
Maybe I can first give some initial ones, and I think due to but for the users, maybe for there is two players like right. There is the operators and the users. The users maybe do not have all the information. He can only determine what is the optimal price and determine what is the strategy of himself. And his behaviors will affect the utilities of all the operators. So the operator need to consider what is the distributive of behaviors of all the users, and then he can optimize his own utilities.
I think that's another. I think the other way is that if I do a centralized solution, maybe somebody has to centralize, and it's not easy for central. So in this way, you do the social optimal, somebody has to sacrifice. But on the other hand, even though game theory still, cooperative game theory still kind of centralized calculation, but it's just like three of us writing a proposal, and everybody have the neutral benefit before that. And if you want to achieve this neutral benefit, might not be the kind of a global optimal. The global optimal is you to work together and then continue.
You need to reduce your share.
Okay. Okay. So maybe I'll continue. And after the matching of the DSOs and FNs, I'll come to the matching between the fork node and the DSS in the physical network. And because we had for all the DSOs have already motivated all the FNs, and for the DSOs already have a virtualized market with the DSS. And the fork nodes within the same DSOs, the DSS will propose to all the fork nodes, and the fork nodes will determine which one he preferred and have the matching in the physical, in the physical way. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, so based on these three kind of ways, and we have the simulations shown as follows based on the hierarchical game framework. And here we can see with the number of the data service subscribers increasing, the total utilities of the fork nodes generally increases. And with the different number of the fork nodes, the performance is different. And because of the limited amount of the capacity, and they will just gradually saturate in some values. And also, you can see compare with the traditional fork computing, the fork computing has a better performance for different kind of duties of data transmission tasks. And based on this kind of this job, and we also have two future works and in this hierarchical game framework. First one is that we may consider that maybe the game framework is more complex in the hierarchical way. And secondly is that if we combine the hierarchical game with reinforcement learning and do something in the machine learning areas. And the first one is that based on this kind of general service architecture, we may see that in these hierarchical layers or maybe in some vertical layers, there exists some collision formation, which means that some resource providers will cooperate with each other to compete with others, and there may exist some different kind of strategies for each resource providers or infrastructure providers in other layers. And also for the infrastructure providers and the mobile users, sometimes mobile phones can act as an infrastructure provider so that they can relate the data transmission services to other users. So in this case, there may exist a position switch in the service architecture. And how can we address this switch is also is very interesting and challenging task. And secondly, we may see that currently there is a lot of literature talking about the multi-agent reinforcement learning, which has a Q function showing as follows. And here we can see the alpha will be the learning rate, the gamma is the discount factor, and the pi will be the strategy for all the players or for all the agents in the reinforcement learning. And in the current literature, and we can see all the players or all the agents is required to determine his own policy or his own strategy so that he can achieve maximize the Q value in the next iteration in the next state as prime and based on the other behaviors of others. And such kind of way will exist a mixed strategy Nash equilibrium solutions. But also such kind of solution may not use global optimal solutions and may also have a very great gap. And we may see that if we consider one step further, we consider the state of the S prime prime, and we may also have the strategy behaviors of the pi in the state of the S prime prime. And between the S prime to the S prime prime will exist a hierarchical game framework, which means that in the horizontal way, there exists a Nash equilibrium. In the vertical way, there exists a sequential equilibrium, a sequential game, which is a stackable equilibrium. And which is shown in this way that each user or each agent is required to determine his optimal policies or strategies so that he can maximize the Q values in the state of S prime based on the optimal solutions of all the agents in the state of the S prime prime. S prime prime. So in this case, combining both the Nash equilibrium and stackable equilibrium, such kind of the reinforcement learning in the multi-agent scenarios can be more complex and more interesting to explore in the future. So based on that, it will be the general defense of my work, and the publications is showing as follows. And the general conclusions is showing as follows. And we will just use the hierarchical game framework to apply in the future heterogeneous network architecture. And we apply the zero limit strategy, the multi-layer, multi-floor stackable game, a three-layer hierarchical game to address different kind of problems during the development of the wireless communication network. And we further show the future works with complex hierarchical game framework, and also trying to combine it with the reinforcement learning. And basically, that is the talk. Thank you very much. So, any questions?